Before Kevin starts, Kevin wants to dedicate the share to Refuah. I also want to dedicate this share to Refuah of Rav Simcha and Ann Steinhauer. Ann Steinhauer's got influenza at the moment, and Rav Simcha Steinhauer isn't well either. So please, God, don't make a full Refuah.
Amen.
Kevin's cousin,
Amen.
all of us, because we're all not super well.
Yeah.
Kevin, what's your cousin's name or your friend's
Well,
cousin?
my friend's dad. So her dad's name is Eliezer Tzvi ben Rivka.
Okay, so a full refuah. Ready?
Amen.
Amen.
Okay, so
Amen.
just a short
Amen.
one, based on one of the recent parashiyot is in the Sefer Bamidbar, when the Jews were wandering the desert, when eventually they come to the land after wandering for 40 years, and there's an incident where the Jews are thirsty. The people are thirsty and they need water, and Hashem says to Moshe, he wants Moshe to sanctify Hashem's name by speaking to a rock, and the water will come out. So Moshe, I don't know, got disillusioned, and the people were nagging and were complaining about the food, and then they got quail, and they were all and certain of them, and they complained about the manna, and there were plagues, and some of them died. But then there was a point where they were thirsty. So Hashem wanted him to speak to the rock, and the water would come out of the rock. But he hit the rock for some reason, but the water still came out of the rock. So the question is, and Hashem was very upset, and that incident prevented Moshe from going into the land of Israel. Why? The question is, now maybe Damon has an answer, or you two guys have an answer. Why did the water still come out of the rock if Hashem said, speak to the rock, and Moshe hit the rock? How's that for a question?
That's a good question. I'll ask my esteemed colleagues.
Yes. Any idea,
Yeah.
Gavin? Gavin's been, and Arthur, you guys have been doing, you have knowledge?
So I'm thinking because at the end of the day, there was still, even when he hit the rock, it's still miraculous. So from the Jewish people's perspective, it was still a miraculous, something miraculous had to happen. So even though he might have not done the correct thing, that miracle of the water coming out needed to happen. So because he did it in the wrong way, and he didn't follow Hashem's instructions, that's why he didn't go into the land of Israel. But that didn't stop Hashem from, even though he didn't follow the orders, it doesn't mean that the miracle didn't still happen.
Yeah.
Two other insights
Am I
of what
right?
Gavin's saying, because I think Gavin's on the right track, is that at the end of the day, is that the people needed to drink water.
Yeah, and that.
And therefore, it's all a miracle from Hashem, and we were all sustained by miracles. So sometimes when the conduit, I can honestly speak for the fact that sometimes I'm feeling very punchy, and if I had to learn on my own without teaching, you get a certain divine help when other people have the intent to learn, even though I might not merit it, because other people are learning. Do you get what I'm saying? Or many cases where, you wonder why a person, lahavdil, is running a business and employing thousands of people, while sometimes their actions are a bit erratic, but it's not that they get away with it, but good stuff still happens because people need to get paid and families need to be supported and infrastructure needs to work. That is a fact. And also he did speak to the rock, Kev. He just hit the rock too. But
okay.
And and Hashem said, speak to the rock. And he didn't hit it silently. He spoke to it. So yeah. So a good one, Kev. If you've got insights, let me know. Let's get started. It's lovely to see you guys in person. I've got a thick cushion for obvious reasons, but please God, it all works. All right. So, guys, I'll tell you what we were discussing last time. It was very, very simple. We were discussing what happens to heirs of an estate if a thief or a robber stole money what's this issue about the principal, the 1/5 surcharge and the asham offering, and does the heir pay the 1/5 the 1/5 surcharge and the asham offering? And does he pay the principal? And we went through all of this. I'm not going to go through it again. The only part that we left out was an alternative explanation was presented, which we hadn't got to last time. So according to the following approach, the Brasa deals with the case where the stolen article is still in existence. Now, guys, the Gemara uses the word extant all over. I'd rather use the word existence. It's easier. I hope you don't mind. So it explains, if you look at the Brasa, why the son must return the principal. Because if it still exists, you give it back. Very straightforward. But it still gives rise to the question as to why he doesn't pay the surcharge on account of his own false oath. So Rava came up with a novel approach, and he said, look, what case are we dealing with here? We're dealing with a case where the father's pouch in which he had stored the stolen article the stolen article was actually something he was given on deposit. And it was, other people found it when he died and gave it back to the son, the family pouch. So obviously, when at the point where the son finds that he must pay the principal, he must return the stolen article itself, basically, because it's still in existence. But we want to know why the son does not pay the 1/5 surcharge for his false oath when he saw that he had no liability to the victim. And according to Rava, he actually swore truthfully, because he didn't know that in the hidden pouch was the stolen article. He only found it later. So there's a principle in Shavuos, not Shavuos as in the way Ashkenazi people say Shavuot. We mean Shavuos as in an oath, by the way.
Shvut, not Shavuos, Shvut.
Shvut.
Shvut, that's it, yeah.
Shvut or Shvus, or what, yeah, Shvut,
Yeah.
Shvut.
Shvut, yeah.
Yeah, but
people do say Shvut. They do say it, yeah, in South Africa, definitely.
So anyway, a Shiva is an oath. So let's just say in that Gemara in 36b, okay, so it's an interesting thing. What you know is that sometimes can somebody believe something and they swear falsely, but they think they're telling the truth. They say, I'm telling you this person wasn't in my garage. In the meantime, this thief might have escaped to a person's garage to stay there overnight when the cops were looking for him. It's not that he was giving a false oath about the whereabouts of the thief. He didn't know the oak rocked up and slept in his garage. So in this case, he inherited a pouch from his father. He didn't think to look for a hidden diamond. So he says, listen, I haven't found it. At the point when he finds it, he returns the diamond. He's done the right thing. He doesn't have to bring an asham offering or 1/5 surcharge. Why? Because he thought he was telling the truth at the time. So that's according to Rava. Okay, it's a very, very straightforward case. Now we go into a slightly different section of the Mishnah, because we were basically stating this case of, let me just try and see if I can share the screen to show where we're holding. This might help. Give me a sec, guys. Okay. Yeah, I tell you at which part we at. Okay. Yeah. However, if he paid him the 5th but did not pay him the principal, or the victim forgave him the 5th but did not forgive him the principal, we forgave him the principal, and the 5th, except for a putter's worth of the principal, he must pursue him. Okay? So what are we saying here? Okay, so that's the part that we added the Mishnah. So we just have to focus on this thing. If the thief paid or the victim forgave him everything except for less than a putter's worth of the principal, the thief doesn't have to pursue him in order to return it. Okay? Because it's not a legal amount worth suing. So the Gemara that we'll talk about, there's two conflicting opinions of Rabba Papa. Okay. Now, what we are saying is that you can't give if the item that you stole is either the amount is forgiven by the victim or is less than a pruta, you don't have to follow the victim to media or any faraway land if it's less than a pruta. It's not a legally suable sum. It is a case where one should return it, but you can't sue over it. So what we are saying is that as far as the teshuva aspect for swearing falsely that you stole it, there's still the asham offering required to Hashem for using his name in vain. And even though there's not one for surcharge, because either you've paid it or the amount has now gone under a pruta or the person forgave you of it, is it's not a suitable amount, and therefore a one for surcharge is not accrued on that. But you cannot give an asham offering until the time that you've actually returned the principal, even if the principal is under a pruta. So although you're legally not sued for it, you have to do the right thing. So you can't bring an asham offering until it's returned. However, if it's worth over a pruta, you've got a legal obligation to return it to wherever the victim may be. But if it's under pruta, you don't. But there are two arguments about this with regards to whether or not it exists. So Rav Papa said they taught this only regarding a case where the robbed item is no longer in existence. But if the robbed item is still in existence in the robber's possession, even if it's less than a pruta's worth of value, it remains outstanding as a debt you have to clear, and the thief must pursue the victim to media or any faraway land to return it before bringing his asham offering, because we're concerned that perhaps its value will eventually increase to a pruta, meaning there's no ways that you can bring an asham offering that retroactively gets cancelled because you haven't returned the principal. Okay? So that's one version of Rav Papa. The other opposite version is stating that many say that Rav Papa said there's no difference whether the robbed item exists or it's no longer in existence. Either way, the thief doesn't need to pursue his victim with payment if less than a pruta's worth of the principal remains outstanding, because we're not concerned that perhaps its value will eventually increase to a pruta's worth. Okay? Meaning that if you give the asham offering, and let's say for some reason the value of the item goes from under a pruta, the principal, to over, all you do is, if it's in existence, return it to the victim. You can give it to the court-appointed agent, because you can base it on what the value was at the time. Okay? Very, very straightforward. Now, this brings up a different point. And that point is a case where we're talking about what's this legal obligation if things are worth less than a pruta and higher than a pruta. Because there's an Amoraic teaching that says, well, one of the Amoraim were Rabba, and he said, if one stole 3 bundles that were valued at 3 prutas at the time of the theft. So guys, here we've got Rava, and he says there's 3 bundles. Each bundle was worth a pruta at the time of the theft, and now their current value decreased and stood at only 2 prutas. Then even if the thief returned 2 of the bundles to the victim out of the 3, he's still liable to return the other one. Now I want to ask you guys, why is this a novelty? Why is this a novelty?
Say that again, please.
Okay. Rava made a statement, even if you're writing, I hope you're listening, that, look, originally when the thief stole the bundles, there were 3 bundles. Each bundle was worth a pruta. They were valued at 3 prutas at the time of the theft, a pruta each. And in the time he had it before the court case, that value of that item eventually decreased, and it now stands at only 2 prutas. So even if the thief returns 2 of the bundles to the victim, he's still liable to return the other one. Now, why is that such a novel idea?
Is it because it's based on the original value at the time of the theft, that he took the 3 and it was valued at 3? So
Okay. What are you trying to say here?
Well, that's the value. It's even though it's devalued to 2 pruta for the 3, it's less than a pruta each for each of the bundles. Originally, the loss was a 3 pruta, was 3 pruta.
I'll accept that answer. What Kevin is trying to say is as follows, okay? Is that although it's presently not worth a pruta, since it was worth a pruta at the time of the theft, on the basis of the timeline of when it was stolen, he's required to return it. Okay? And even to pursue his victim with it to some faraway land, according to Rashi. Now, we're going to learn even more from this, and this is the following. By the same token, guys, if he stole only one bundle, and that was worth a pruta and its value decreased, he's required to return it. That's also another novelty. Okay, so the reason why Rava focuses on the case of 3 bundles is it's going to inform us of the added novelty that although the thief already fulfilled the mitzvah of returning the stolen property with the first 2 bundles, why? Because if each bundle was worth Kevin a pruta, then all the thief has to do is, if it's over a pruta, he has to return that. So he's done that with 2 bundles. So he might have thought he fulfilled his obligation. And you might think that, well, the 3rd one remaining is actually not worth a pruta, so he can keep it. It's worth 2/3 of a pruta, basically. Then we're learning from here he remains bound by his previous obligation to return even the 3rd, according to Tosfot, as what was worth at the time of the robbery. So we've learned 3 principles here. Let me just tell you what they are. Principle number 1, we learned that it's marked at the time of the value of the robbery. Okay, so that's the reason why you have to return it. That's what Kevin suggested. Am I right, Kev?
The value at the time of
at the time of the robbery, because it can't be
original value.
Time. Yeah, because the present time it's not worth that. So that's the first aspect. That's what Kevin says. You have to measure the correct timeline, and we've always learned, as Kevin rightly said, that it's at the time of the robbery. We've always said that. Not at the court case, it could occur months later. Second point to know is that you say, okay, originally I'm not allowed to remain with the pruta's worth of goods. That's illegal. So guess what? It was worth a pruta each, that's 3 pruta. It's now only worth 2 pruta for 3 of them. Let me return it, and I'm left with less than a pruta. So therefore, since he cannot sue me, the victim cannot sue me, let me keep that 3rd because it's worth under pruta. Why not? Why not? Can't sue me. So Rav is saying no. The novelty is that even though it's worth less than a pruta, it's done at the time of the value of the theft, and therefore it has to be returned, the remaining part. It's not a chiddush about returning what you already owe, because it's worth more than a pruta even now. But the reality is you have to return all of it, because the logic might be, well, I'm keeping less than a pruta, you can't sue me, what's the big deal? Rabbi is saying, no, if it was worth less than a pruta at the time of the theft, he has an obligation to return it. That's according to Tosfot. Okay.
I always thought that, can I just mention something? Sorry, I always thought that you can return it if it's the same value or higher, that's fine. If it's a lower value, then you have to not just return it because it's deteriorated. You have to give them the monetary equivalent. That's what I thought.
So that's an excellent point. The reality is, if it's no longer in existence, if it's no longer there are issues as far as what's Gavin's concerning. There are opinions that say, well, at the end of the day, if it's dropped in value, it's not exactly the victim's fault. But Gavin, we've learned pretty much along the way that as long as it's still in existence, you can return what you stole. The only time it becomes a problem is if it no longer resembles the initial item, because the pasuk is he must return what he stole. Do you get what I'm saying? So there was So there seems to be a superfluous word which says if it no longer resembles the state in which she stole it, where it's no longer recognizable, the thief then owns it. So in other words, we learned you take wood and you've made it into a cabinet, but you can't dismantle it and it has a physical change. That acquires it for the thief, which means then the thief has to replace the original value. Okay. Now, does he have to replace it originally with wood, or what wood is worth now? Well, he's got to buy new wood, so if it's increased in value, he's got to replace it with the wood. But if he can return the item that was in existence, even though it's dropped in value, then that is unfortunately the original owner's problem, because all the thief has to do is make restitution on what was stolen. We've learned that, unless there's a physical change.
No. We have covered both. I know.
And so we're saying if there's a physical change, it's acquired for this thief. If he sells or slaughters this stolen animal, he pays the 4 or 5-fold. Do you get what I'm saying? Because he has acquired it, etc. But as far as a normal item, you must remember, robber pays exactly what he stole. A thief pays double. So believe me, the original victim is not crying. Okay? And so as far as this is concerned, he only has to return what he stole, or the cash equivalent of what it's worth now. But the first price is to return what he stole. Does the victim lose out because he could have sold it? Well, yes, but did the thief deprive him of anything? No. If he stole 10 bottles of wine and returns those wines, what has the victim lost? What has he lost, Gav?
Yeah.
The thief might not have the money. It's good enough he returns the article. So all we are learning here, as far as Rav is concerned, is at the end of the day, the victim, although he cannot sue for less than a pruta, if it was worth a pruta at the time of the theft, the robber cannot hold it back to say, well, it's less than a pruta now, and therefore I can keep it because there's no legal case. That's all we're learning. Okay. And Rav cited certain support for this ruling because we learned in our Mishnah in 96b, this was quite a while ago, okay? If one stole chametz and Pesach passed over it while in his possession, he may say to the owner, behold, that which is yours is right here before you take it back as it is. So, I want to ask Arthur a question. Can Arthur answer a question?
Sure.
Okay. Arthur.
Face maybe.
Okay. Lucky you. All right. So, Arth, what we are saying here is as follows: is that there seems to be what's the status of something if a thief steals it during Pesach? What's the like chametz and Pesach, the time period of Pesach passed over it when a Jewish thief has it in his possession? What does it actually mean?
Well, it's really a comment on Pesach first of the brothers thing, because you're not supposed to have comments anyway.
Yeah.
So
why?
I would say, well, it's Pesach.
Correct. And therefore,
you aren't allowed to own Pesach. You've been stolen Pesach.
yes. And what's the penalty for that? I mean, what does it render chametz?
Has no value because it's been sold anyway.
Exactly.
Somebody else's.
Arthur answered correctly. So what's Arthur saying is that as follows, right? If one stole chametz and Pesach time period passed over it while in his possession, okay? In other words, so that it had value originally when the Jewish thief stole it, but it became prohibited for benefit and worthless while in his possession, because you cannot make any use, nor sell it, nor derive benefit from it of chametz if you still keep it during Pesach. Exactly as Arthur said. Well done, mate. So he can say to the original owner, Gavin, behold, that which is yours is right before you. Take it back as it is. So what are we saying, Kevin? That if he has the chametz in his possession, even in its current state, despite the fact that it had no value now, it had value when he stole it. Okay? and therefore you can return it back to the original owner as is. That's what we're learning from this. So it has an advantage to the thief in this case. In other words, if it depreciates, Kev, you have to pay the original value back to the victim so that the robber can't keep it if it's now worth less than a pruta, but it was worth a pruta in terms of a theft. But it backfires on the victim, because if he stole chometz before Pesach and kept it, and it's now worthless, he can return it to the original owner, but the original owner can't sell it, and he can't derive benefit from it. And the reason he can is because you can infer from the reason that the reason why he can return worthless chametz by today's standards, because now it's not worth anything and it was before Pesach, is because he doesn't have to pay the original value, Kevin, because it is deemed to be still in existence, the item. So he can tell the owner, look, I took it from you. What is yours is before you. But if the stolen article has disappeared, been damaged, etc., and the thief can't say to the owner, look, what is yours is before you, then even though the stolen article has no monetary value now, since originally at the time of the theft it had monetary value, he'd have to pay the original owner its value before Pesach. So what we're learning here is, although the third bundle is presently not worth the pruta, since originally at the time of the theft it was worth the pruta, the thief must pay for it. Okay? So in other words, if that bundle is still there, he returns it to the owner as is, and if it's no longer in existence, Kevin, this is the important part, he must pay the owner the amount it was worth when he stole it, according to Tosfot. Does that make sense?
Damon was, but why would, how did the thief have access to the chametz during Pesach? How was he able to steal it? If was it locked away like we? How did he? How was it? Surely in the old days, I think they gave it away, or maybe they didn't keep it like we do.
No. So that's an excellent question. So what Kevin's asking is as follows. Hello, Danny. So what we're saying is as follows, is that at the end of the day, Kevin's right. Surely it couldn't have been worth much before Pesach because people needed to get rid of their chometz. So Kevin, what they did do is they would sell it before Pesach and get a proper fee for it, or if they wanted it back, they'd be able to buy it back at a new value, but they would technically have to get it out of their possession. But they'd have to get it out of their possession and sell it to a non-Jew. This is a Jew that stole it. And now it's rendered any Jew that owns chometz during Pesach to be null and void and worthless. It's a penalty. You can't use it for hanoah. You can't use it for benefit. You see, Kev, so it was a Jewish thief. That's the problem. It wasn't going to be in the Jew's possession during Pesach anyway, the chametz. He was going to
steal it from a non-Jew. The non-Jew it was sold to. The thief stole it from the non-Jew.
I'm saying that the original owner should have sold it to a non-Jew before Pesach. Anyway, 3 or 4 days before Pesach, he was busy cleaning his items, etc., and maybe a Jewish neighbor or whatever came in and saw it and decided to steal his Shevis Regal. So now it's disappeared, and a Jew owns it, and now it becomes the hanoah, forbidden for benefit, forever, for any Jew. Can't sell it, can't use it. That's all. Nothing more complicated than that, but that is absolutely all. Nothing complicated. So, okay, so that being the case, we've learned one primary lesson, is that it can work out to the thief's benefit, Gavin, or the thief's detriment, to figure out what the value was before, at the time of theft, compared to the current value. However, the best thing to do if you steal an item is not to consume it, because otherwise you have to replace it with cold hard cash at the time of the value of the robbery. Do you get what I'm saying? Which could work out beneficial or detrimental. The best thing to do is be able to return the original article. Then at the end of the day, the thief doesn't lose out. The victim might a little, but the victim gets back what was stolen. The victim, Gavin, cannot ask any more than that. Truth. He can't. Okay. Let's just deal with another issue. Rava inquires about a similar case. If one stole 2 bundles that were together, valued at a prutta, and he returned one of them to the victim, what's the law? Okay, I want you, Kevin, to tell me what the case is. Just repeat back to me what I said. I want to see that you guys are with me. What's Rava's latest case?
If 3 bundles were stolen and the value was
3 bundles was before. Now, what are we doing now? What case?
2 bundles.
Yes, and what are they worth together?
Less than a prutta.
No,
I mean, less than a prutta each, or 2 prutta.
no, they're valued at a prutta combined.
Combined value.
Yes.
Ah, combined. Okay.
Okay, so that's going to change the case very much. So there's 2 bundles. Together they're worth a prutta. And the thief returned one of them to the victim. Now, we want to know what the law is. Why is it such a question? Because do we say as of now there's no robbed item of value in the possession, since the remaining bundle is not worth a prutta and is therefore not liable to return it? Okay? In other words, since the remaining bundle was not worth a prutta even at the time of the robbery, the robber is under no obligation to return it. That's according to the Ravat. Okay. So that's one of the ways to say it. Or perhaps, guys, we can say that he didn't actually return the robbed item at all that was in his possession. In other words, since the bundle that he gave back is worth less than a prutta, because 2 bundles are worth 1 prutta, this is worth half a prutta, he hasn't returned anything to the owner. And he still remains obligated to give the original owner the second bundle. Okay? So, in other words, for when he stole the value of a prutta in total, he committed the sin of robbery. That's now a legal case of robbery, and he remains in violation of that prohibition until he fulfills the mitzvah of returning the robbed item. Remember, it's both a mitzvah and a legal obligation now. By giving back at least a prutta's worth. That's according to the Ravat. So our case, guys, differs somewhat from one who stole 3 bundles because they were worth 2 pruttas and the thief returned 2 of them. So the 2 bundles that he returned in that case were worth at least a prutta. So at least the return constitutes a return of theft legally. So the remaining bundle wasn't even worth a prutta. The thief was no longer in violation, and we thought maybe he could keep the 3rd bundle. But the reason why he can't is because originally at the time of theft, it was worth a prutta. If it wasn't, he wouldn't have to return the 3rd bundle. You get what I'm saying? That was that case. Now we're saying, what's the case when it's a prutta together? We're saying now it's a problem because if he returns half a bundle, he hasn't fulfilled his obligation of returning a prutta. It's a legal obligation and a mitzvah. When he returned 2 of the 3, he still fulfilled of a prutta. He was just had less than a prutta's worth of current value remaining. This is a different case. 2 bundles, Gavin, worth a prutta together. If he pays only a 1 bundle, he's not fulfilling his legal or mitzvah obligation because it's less than a prutta that he's giving back. Okay? So the Gemara reports after raising this inquiry that Rava resolved it. So how did Rava resolve it? He says there's no robbed item here and there's no return here. Okay, what does this mean? So Rava seems to be saying 2 things. Number 1, since less than a prutta's worth of the robbed item remains, the thief is no longer in violation. Number 2, since the thief did not return a prutta's worth to the owner, he remains subject to the requirement to return stolen property. Okay? Now, the Gemara says, okay, it's confusing because if there's no robbed item here, then there's a return there. Meaning if you haven't robbed anything because of what's remaining, then it's as if you've returned it. So since the thief is no longer considered in violation, because he's got less than a prutta's worth of stuff, how can the obligation to return the stolen property still rest on him? You see, so that's what the Gemara is asking. Like, what does it really mean? So the Gemara explains, listen, this is clearly what Rava meant to say, right? Even though there is no robbed item here, there's no fulfillment here of the mitzvah to return the robbed item. In other words, although nothing of value remains in the thief's possession, and under monetary law he cannot be sued for returning of the remaining bundle because it's worth less than a prutta, he still has not fulfilled his legal obligation and the mitzvah of returning the stolen property, because together they were worth a prutta. He had to return it together. So he actually gave the owner nothing back of value. So in order to discharge the mitzvah that the Torah placed upon him, he must return the remaining bundle to his victim. Okay, so I think we can end off on this note. We've got about 10 minutes left, but we started before, and I think it's enough. I'm certainly tired. Does it make sense? Are there any questions, guys?
No, it was actually quite clever. The whole thing was actually quite interesting.
Damon, the guy can't steal; he has to return it, regardless of the value. It's immoral. It's you know what I mean. It's regardless of the fact that it's not that it has to be the minimum value of a prutta. You can't steal anything, even if it's worth 1 cent.
So, Kevin,
1 cent to 1 million rand.
There are two different aspects. The one is a legal aspect, and the other one is a soul atonement and accountability aspect. And Kevin is 100% right. Is that people make mistakes every day, purposeful mistakes, I call it, where they steal. But, you know, this is the problem in South Africa, Kevin. You had that court case with that client of yours that wouldn't pay for the lesson she gave, and you had recourse. In South Africa, it costs so much to litigate that you never actually get restitution, and that's why you have to take deposits, and it's Hashem's open miracle that everybody ends up getting paid. I can tell you that much. It's incredible. So all I'm saying is that because there's no ways in the South African climate, so you've got a contract written out and you write and you can sue. It's going to cost you more to sue than you're going to get in compensation, because you have to pay for attorney costs and advocate costs, etc. It says in Pikei Avot, when there's no law, man will swallow his fellow alive.
Yeah.
So what we are saying is here, there's a different, in Torah law, there are two components. Components. There's the atonement and restitution component, that when you've paid back, you've made spiritual restitution, and then you atone for your sin so that your soul is cleansed. The other aspect is justice, where the courts of law enforce justice for the weak and the meek, where the strong that took advantage of them are forced to pay by or face very, very heavy sentencing, whether it's jail sentencing or lashes or financial attachment of goods by the sheriff of the court. Unfortunately, we need a legal system, because one of the Noahid's laws is setting up courts of law, because most people are immoral. In fact, Voltaire said it brilliantly. He said, if it wasn't for religion, the poor would kill the rich. Think about it. So the thing of it is, people that are scared of Shemaim and people that are scared of the physical law, it helps keep people in check. But Kevin's right. But Kevin, everything we discussed here with Rava had to do with the factors: what is legally suable and why. So everything we dealt with here were legal issues. Rava dealt with legal issues, not with the soul. Because if we're just dealing with the soul, there would never be Bava Kamma. You wouldn't need to. Everybody do the right thing. Everybody's cagey, Kevin. Yeah. All right.
Tomorrow, Damon, can we?
What time?
Can we start at 7:05 tomorrow?
Done.
7:05, 7:10. Okay, great. I've got to take a call here. Thanks, man. Cheers.
Cheers.